When the call came through, I was standing in line at a coffee shop in Chicago. It was my cousin Paige. Olivia, he's gone. Uncle Raymond passed last night. Uncle Raymond. My father's older brother. The man who raised me when my own parents couldn't be bothered. I dropped my coffee. Not just from shock, but because I realized no one else in the family had thought to tell me. Not Aunt Valerie. Not my own mother. Not even my siblings. And when I flew down for the funeral, they pretended I didn't exist. My name wasn't in the program. My seat wasn't reserved. And when I tried to speak at the service, my sister whispered, "This isn't your place, Olivia. You were never really family." But what they didn't know was that Uncle Raymond's final will had already been signed and sealed. And my name was the only one on it. Have you ever been erased by the people who were supposed to love you the most? Tell me in the comments, because this is the story of how I went from being called a nobody to becoming the only heir. I was never the favorite. Not when I was 5. Not when I graduated with honors. Not even when I held my mother's hand during her surgery. My older sister, Lauren, was the shining star, the valedictorian, the ballet dancer, the one with the perfect blonde curls and the smile that could bend my father's anger. My brother, Jacob, was the golden boy, 3 years older than me, football captain, always invited to sit at the grown-up table at Thanksgiving. And me? I was the quiet one. The one who read books at dinner. The one who asked why too often. The one who was always a little too sensitive. At least that's what Mom used to say. You need to toughen up, Olivia. Life isn't fair. I think I was 11 when I realized she meant I wasn't allowed to feel things. Our home in Raleigh, North Carolina was big, too big. It always smelled like citrus and furniture polish. But it was cold. The kind of cold that doesn't come from the thermostat but from the way people look right through you. The only place that ever felt warm was Uncle Raymond's porch. He lived across town in a small white cottage with blue shutters and a porch swing that creaked when the wind picked up. He wasn't actually my blood uncle, he was my dad's cousin, but he'd known me since I was born. And unlike everyone else in my family, he saw me. You've got a quiet strength, Liv. Don't let them smother that. He'd say that while handing me a glass of sweet tea and letting me nap beside his old golden retriever, Bruno. When I turned 16 and my parents forgot my birthday, Raymond showed up in his truck with a cake he'd made himself. Chocolate with raspberry filling. My favorite. Let them forget. I won't. I think that's the first time I truly cried in front of someone. High school came and went. Lauren got into Stanford. Jacob was already at Duke. And I got a full scholarship to a small liberal arts college in Vermont. But when I told my family, my mother looked at me and said, "Vermont? That's barely a real school." Uncle Raymond, though? He drove me there himself. He helped me unpack every box, hung my fairy lights, even fixed the broken leg on my dorm bed. Before he left, he hugged me tight and whispered, "When the time comes, Olivia, you'll have everything you need. Just be patient." I didn't understand what he meant back then, but I do now. Over the years, I kept in touch with Raymond more than anyone. I'd visit every summer, call him on Sundays, send him postcards from wherever I traveled. And when my parents downsized their home and didn't even tell me until after the move, it was Uncle Raymond who drove 3 hours just to take me to dinner. When I lost my job during the pandemic, when my first boyfriend cheated on me, when I was diagnosed with clinical depression and felt like no one in the world gave a damn, he was there. He told me stories about his late wife, June. He taught me how to fix a leaky faucet. He once mailed me an old photo of us on his porch swing with a note. Don't let them make you forget who you are. So when I say he was the only father I ever really had, I mean it. But the rest of the family? They hated how close we were. Especially Lauren. Why are you always clinging to that old man? You think he's going to leave you his house or something? She said it as a joke. But now, that house, the bank accounts, the land, and everything else are legally mine. They say betrayal doesn't always come with knives. Sometimes it comes with silence, with glances that skip over you, with invitations that never arrive. And sometimes, it's not what they say, it's what they don't say. After college, I moved to Boston for grad school. Uncle Raymond helped me with my first apartment deposit. I was working 2 jobs, barely affording groceries. And yet, not once did my mom ask if I was okay. Lauren, on the other hand, got an apartment in Manhattan paid for in full. Mom posted about it on Facebook with the caption, "So proud of my baby girl. Off to conquer the world." I commented, "Congrats, Lauren." Nobody replied. Not even Lauren. At Thanksgiving that year, I drove 9 hours to come home. I arrived with a homemade pumpkin pie. When I walked through the front door, Jacob looked up from his phone and went, "Oh, you came?" That's it. No hug. No smile. Just surprised that I showed up at all. Later that evening, I heard my mother whisper to Lauren in the kitchen, "Why does she always look so tired? Maybe if she smiled more, she'd find someone." It was like I didn't even exist in their eyes. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't even the backup. But the one that stung the most? My 28th birthday. Uncle Raymond took the train into the city and took me out for sushi. We laughed for hours. He even gave me a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a key. "What's this for?" I asked. "Just hold on to it," he smiled. "For later." 2 days later, I got a group text from Mom. "Happy birthday to our amazing Lauren. 32 looks good on you. Partying face party popper." Do you know what day Lauren's birthday is? 2 weeks after mine. It wasn't just the dates they forgot. It was me. Family weddings? I was invited, but always seated with the cousins instead of siblings. Family group chats? I was added, but no one ever replied when I typed. They'd share updates about their lives, Lauren's promotion, Jacob's new house in Austin. But the moment I mentioned my mental health journey, or my graduate thesis, it was radio silence. Once, at Grandma's 80th birthday, Lauren turned to me and said, "You know, you really don't have to try so hard to be different. Just be normal for once." Normal? What does that even mean? Pretend I wasn't in therapy? Pretend I wasn't holding my life together with duct tape and late-night journaling? Pretend I wasn't always the one watching everyone else be loved? I thought things might change when I got promoted at the publishing house. I shared the news in the group chat. "Hey everyone, I got promoted to senior editor. I finally get to lead my own imprint." You know what I got? A single thumbs up emoji from Jacob. Lauren didn't even read the message. The next week, Lauren posted a photo of her new kitchen renovation. Dozens of comments from family poured in. "Wow, gorgeous. Your husband's such a keeper. You're the queen, Lauren." Meanwhile, I was sitting alone in my Boston apartment, eating instant ramen, wondering if I'd ever be seen as someone worthy. The final straw came a year before Uncle Raymond's passing. He had invited all of us to his house for Christmas. A tradition he held every year, small, warm, just close family. That year, I arrived early to help decorate. We put up the tree together, strung lights around the porch, and he played old jazz records from his collection. He smiled at me and said, "This might be the last one I host, but it's going to be special." On Christmas morning, I woke up early to start breakfast. I waited and waited. Nobody came. At 11 a.m., Uncle Raymond checked his phone and frowned. Lauren texted. She said they're doing Christmas at her in-laws this year. Jacob said they're stuck in traffic, but it's been 5 hours. He didn't say it, but I saw the pain in his eyes. We ate alone that year. Just the two of us. Ham and potatoes, 2 paper crowns from the crackers we popped, and Bruno lying between us like old times. That night, as we sipped hot cocoa by the fire, he looked over at me and said, "Olivia, do you ever wonder what kind of legacy you'll leave behind?" I nodded. "All the time." He patted my hand. "You're the only one who ever shows up. The only one who listens. Don't forget that." I didn't understand what he meant then, but I felt something shift that night, like the seed of a truth had been planted, a truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew about family. It happened on a Tuesday. I was in a Zoom meeting half listening to a junior editor pitch cover concepts when my phone vibrated. I ignored it the first time, but when it buzzed again, 5 missed calls, all from Paige, my cousin. I stepped out. I answered on the 4th ring. "Olivia?" Her voice cracked. "He's gone." Uncle Raymond passed last night in his sleep. For a second, the world stood still. I couldn't breathe. I dropped my phone. By the time I reached Raleigh, it was already too late. They'd buried him that morning. No notice. No invite. Nothing. I stood outside the cemetery gates, watching from the sidewalk as his casket was lowered into the ground. Lauren stood beside Jacob, wearing her designer sunglasses like a shield. My mother clutched a bouquet of white lilies, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. None of them saw me. Or maybe they did. And they just didn't care. I wasn't even allowed to grieve him properly. I sat alone that night in the motel, holding a crumpled photo of me and Uncle Raymond on the porch swing. I remembered the key he gave me, the one I still carried on my chain. What was it for? The next morning, I received a call from a law firm, Holloway and Sheffield. Ms. Carter, I'm attorney Sheffield. Your uncle named you as primary contact for matters concerning his estate. Would you be able to join us for the reading of his will? I blinked. Wait, me? Yes. You are listed as the primary beneficiary. When I walked into that law office 3 days later, I didn't know what to expect. But the moment I saw my family already seated, I realized they didn't expect me. Lauren's jaw tightened. Jacob narrowed his eyes. Mom just blinked and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You got invited too? Lauren said with a mocking tone. I sat down without answering. The lawyer cleared his throat. We'll begin. Mr. Raymond Carter's last will and testament, updated 6 months prior to his passing, is hereby being read into record. I braced myself. I expected maybe the photo albums, maybe a letter, maybe nothing at all. But then, he said it. To my niece, Olivia Carter, I leave the entirety of my estate. This includes my home and surrounding property in Wake County, all liquid assets, personal belongings, and exclusive access to my trust fund established in 2004. The room went still. You could have heard a pin drop. Jacob stood up first. This has to be a mistake. Raymond would never do this. What about his siblings? What about Mom? Sheffield didn't flinch. Your uncle made his wishes very clear. It's all documented. Olivia is the sole heir. Lauren hissed. You manipulated him. You took advantage of an old man. I turned slowly to face her. He was the only person in this family who ever loved me. Maybe that's why. My mother spoke for the first time. Olivia, sweetheart, this is going to cause tension. Maybe we should divide things fairly. Fairly? I laughed bitterly. You mean like how I wasn't even told he died? Like how you buried him without me? That kind of fairness. The lawyer opened a folder and handed me an envelope. Mr. Carter left you a personal letter. Would you like to read it now, or? I took it with shaking hands. The handwriting was familiar. Olivia, reading the letter silently. Dear Liv, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry we didn't get one more porch swing moment together. I hope you understand why I left you everything. It wasn't about money. It was about legacy. About seeing someone in the family who lived with empathy, who showed up, who didn't demand love, but gave it freely anyway. You were never a nobody. You were always the one I trusted to carry forward what matters most. This world will try to dim your light, but I trust you'll never let it go out. Love you always. Uncle R. Tears fell before I could stop them. For once, I didn't wipe them away. When the meeting ended, everyone stormed out. Jacob slammed the door. Lauren muttered something about lawyers and appeals. My mother looked at me and whispered, "This isn't over." But I just stood there, letter in one hand, key in the other. My uncle's love finally making me feel whole. That night, I drove to Uncle Raymond's house. My house now. I stood on the porch, inserted the key into the lock, and stepped inside. It smelled like cedar and old books. Bruno's leash still hung on the hook. The porch swing creaked in the wind. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral after a lifetime of being left out of the invitations. But I knew one thing for certain. They may have erased me from their memories, but I was the one name he never forgot. 3 weeks after the will was read, the phone calls started. First from Jacob, then Lauren, Then, surprisingly from Mom. Each with a slightly different tone, but all with the same underlying message. Let's talk. Jacob invited me to lunch at a steakhouse near his law firm. I hadn't seen him since that day in the lawyer's office. I arrived on time. He showed up 15 minutes late, looking polished in a navy blazer like nothing had happened. Liv, he smiled, extending his arms. You looked professional. You called me here.
What do you want, Jacob?
He took a sip of his water, carefully placing it down. Look, I know you're feeling emotional, but we should be practical. The land around Raymond's house? That could go for nearly $800,000 if you parcel it. I just stared. I'm not selling. Be reasonable, Olivia, he said, leaning forward. You don't even live in North Carolina anymore. Why hang on to a dead man's house? That dead man raised me. You wouldn't understand.
He scoffed. Come on.
He helped you with rent, and now you think you're his daughter? I stood up. You don't get to decide what I was to him. Then don't be surprised when people start asking questions. This won't sit well with the family. I grabbed my purse. Tell them to sit with it anyway. 2 days later, it was Lauren. She showed up at Raymond's front door unannounced, wearing sunglasses and holding 2 pumpkin spice lattes like this was a casual brunch. Olivia, look at you, still using this old place. I didn't invite her in. She walked past me anyway. Okay. So, I've had some time to think, and we should talk about the lake property. There is no we. She blinked. For a moment, the charm cracked. You don't think it's fair that you get everything, do you? Fair like when you celebrated your birthday and forgot mine every year? She flinched. That was Mom's job.
No.
That was all of you. I pulled out the letter from Uncle Raymond, placed it on the table in front of her. He didn't choose me out of pity. He chose me because I was there. She read the letter in silence. Then she said, "This is emotional blackmail. You're making us look bad. You did that all on your own." She stood.
Fine.
But you'll regret burning bridges. Maybe. But at least I finally built one that didn't collapse under your weight. I didn't slam the door. I just closed it. Quietly. Because dignity doesn't need noise. It needs clarity. The next confrontation came from Mom. She invited me to brunch at her country club. I met her in the lobby. She was already sipping her mimosa. Olivia, she said, placing a napkin in her lap. You look thin. Are you eating well? Why did you want to meet, Mom? Oh, just to catch up. And to remind you that family matters. I stared at her. Family? You mean the one that forgot to tell me my only father figure died? Raymond wasn't your father, Olivia. He was more of a parent than you've ever been. Don't be dramatic. Don't be dismissive. There was a pause. Look, I know you're upset, but things like wills can be adjusted, challenged. You don't want this to go legal, do you? Are you threatening me?
No.
I'm protecting our family. From what? Me finally having something? She sipped her drink calmly. You've always been so emotional. And you've always been so cold. Watch your tone. Or what? You'll cut me out of another family photo. She said nothing. And neither did I. Because that was the last moment I'd ever allow her to take my voice. A week later, Attorney Sheffield sent out a final notice. All claims and contests to the estate have been denied. Distribution is finalized. I stood on the porch of what was now my home. Sunlight touched the shutters. The wind moved through the pine trees behind the house. Bruno's old leash still hung near the door, even though he'd passed years ago. Inside, I found one more envelope, hidden in Uncle Raymond's bookshelf behind a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. It wasn't a letter this time. It was a copy of his first life insurance policy. And handwritten on the back were the words, "You were never invisible, Olivia. You were just too bright for their dim little world. They say when you finally stop shrinking yourself to fit in, people will call you arrogant, ungrateful,
cruel. Let them.
Because standing tall in your truth might be the loneliest thing you ever do, but it's also the most powerful. It's strange how silence gets louder after a storm. For weeks after the confrontation, I didn't hear a single word from Lauren, Jacob, or my mother. No angry texts. No lawsuits. No backhanded voicemails. Just nothing. You'd think I'd feel triumphant. But honestly, it felt like mourning. Not just for Uncle Raymond, but for the illusion of a family I'd spent my whole life trying to earn. Paige, my cousin, was the only one who reached out. She called one Sunday morning, her voice trembling like she'd been holding it all in. "Olivia, I saw what they're saying in the group chat. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize."
No, I do.
"Because I saw how they treated you growing up. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to see it. And now," she paused, choking back tears. "Raymond was proud of you, Liv. He used to show me your postcards. Said, she's going places none of us could even dream of." That night, I cried harder than I had since the funeral. Not out of grief, but out of release. A few days later, I got a message from Aunt Valerie, my mother's sister. "I always liked you, Olivia. You remind me of June. Quiet strength. You inherited more than just his land." It shocked me. Not because she said it, but because it was the first time I felt seen by someone older than me in this family. I started noticing things differently in the weeks that followed. The family group chat? I was still in it, but my messages continued to go ignored. When Lauren posted her New Year goals list, everyone responded with encouragement. I posted a photo of the new writing studio I was building in Raymond's backyard. No replies. So I left the chat. Not dramatically. No final message. Just a quiet exit. It felt like hanging up the phone on a conversation that had never really included me. I went back through old journals and letters Raymond had saved over the years. Some were things I had written him. Others were things he had written but never sent. One was addressed to my mother. "Karen, I know you think I've spoiled Olivia, but what I've really done is remind her that she's worthy, that she matters. I hope one day you'll see that too, before it's too late." He never sent it, because he knew she wouldn't listen. There were other flashbacks too. Moments I'd tucked away in the attic of my memory, pretending they didn't hurt. Like when I got the lead in the school play in 9th grade, and Mom skipped it because Jacob had a golf tournament. Or when I published my first short story in a magazine and Lauren said, "Cute. Maybe one day you'll write something real." Or the time Mom said to me at Thanksgiving, "You're just different, Olivia. I don't mean that in a bad way. You just don't fit in with the rest of us." She was right. I didn't. And for the first time in my life, I realized that was okay. There's a kind of grief that doesn't come with tears. It comes with clarity. The clarity that you were always telling the truth, even when no one else acknowledged it. The clarity that you deserved more, even when they made you beg for scraps of affection. I started therapy again, not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to put the pieces back together intentionally. My therapist, Dr. Bennett, listened carefully as I unpacked years of quiet wounds. "They never hit me," I told her once. "They just erased me." She nodded. "And that kind of pain lingers the longest. But you're not invisible now, Olivia. You're rebuilding." I started doing small things to reclaim the space I'd been pushed out of. I turned the guest bedroom in Uncle Raymond's house into a library. I framed old photos of me and him and hung them in the hallway. I replanted the flower beds out front, the same tulips he and June had loved. Each bloom felt like a quiet rebellion against every year I was made to feel small. Some nights, I'd sit on the porch swing, a cup of tea in hand, the stars above blinking like little affirmations. And I'd hear his voice in my head. "Don't let them smother that quiet strength." There was one night in particular, a stormy Thursday in February, when Lauren called. I didn't pick up. She texted, "I don't want to fight. I miss having a sister." I stared at it for a long time, typed out 10 replies, deleted each one. Finally, I wrote back, "You don't miss having a sister. You miss having someone who didn't fight back." I never heard from her again. Sometimes, the loss we feel isn't from death. It's from realizing someone was never who we thought they were. Or worse, that we were never who they wanted us to be. And that's a death of its own. But here's what I know now. The people who try to erase you, they only do that because your truth makes them uncomfortable. And I refuse to shrink myself to make anyone feel safe in their ignorance. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly, like sunrise through a cracked window. Slow,
Soft.
but undeniable. It began with the garden. One morning, I walked into Raymond's backyard and just sat in the dirt. Still in my pajamas, hands trembling, heart heavy. I hadn't touched the flower beds in years. But something inside whispered, "Start here." So I did. I pulled weeds, dug with my bare hands, tilled soil like it was memory. Like every root I tugged was another lie I'd been told about my worth. And when I planted the first tulip bulb, the same kind Raymond used to grow, I felt something shift. Not just around me.
In me.
Paige started visiting once a month. She brought cookies. We drank tea. Sometimes we talked about Uncle Raymond. Sometimes we just sat. One day, she brought an old Polaroid of the two of us as kids, sitting on Raymond's porch swing, covered in ice cream and glitter. She handed it to me and said, "You've always been the realest person in this family." That photo now hangs above my writing desk. Speaking of which, I started writing again. Not just journal entries. Not just emails I never sent. But real stories. Ones about girls who didn't fit in. Women who weren't believed. People who were pushed to the margins, but built kingdoms there. I submitted a short story called The Only Heir to a small indie literary journal. They published it, then asked for more. I turned the old guest bedroom into a studio, painted the walls sage green, hung fairy lights around the window, bought a second-hand desk with tiny gold knobs. I filled it with books Raymond had left behind, photos of him and June, and one of Bruno's old toys, a reminder of simpler love. This wasn't just a room. It was a vow to never disappear again. Therapy helped too. Dr. Bennett encouraged me to write letters I'd never send. I wrote one to my mother, one to Lauren, one to Jacob, but I wrote the longest one to myself. Dear Olivia, I'm sorry for every time I called you too much, for every time I begged you to stay silent just to keep the peace. You deserved better from them, from me. I promise to protect you now. I burned that one in the fireplace, watched the ashes rise, felt lighter. One day, I hosted a small dinner. Just me, Paige, her husband Chris, and a couple from the bookstore I'd started volunteering at, Sam and Margot. We grilled vegetables on the back porch, played jazz, laughed till we cried. At one point, Sam raised a glass and said, "To found family, the ones we choose." My heart swelled. I'd never heard it said so simply, but I felt it in my bones. The next morning, I wrote a post on social media. Just a photo of the garden in bloom and this caption. I used to think being left out meant I was unworthy, but maybe I was just too good at growing in places they couldn't reach. It went viral. People from all over commented, messaged me, shared their stories. Suddenly, I wasn't alone in my grief or my healing. I started a newsletter called Letters from the Porch. Every month, I shared a new story, memories of Raymond, healing lessons, emotional reflections. Within a year, it had over 20,000 subscribers. People wrote back. Widows in Wisconsin. Estranged daughters in Pakistan. Fathers trying to reconnect with their kids in Oregon. One message read, "You gave language to something I've felt my whole life. Thank you." That one made me cry. The good kind. I realized something. Maybe healing isn't about getting back what we lost. Maybe it's about becoming someone who doesn't need their approval anymore. And maybe legacy isn't measured in money or inheritance. It's measured in the love we extend, in the truth we honor, in the silence we refuse to keep anymore. Raymond once told me, "You don't have to change the world, Liv. Just change what part of it you can reach." I reach people now. Through my words. Through this house. Through every story I refuse to swallow. They called me a nobody.
But now?
I've built a life where being somebody doesn't depend on their permission. And that's the inheritance I treasure the most. If you're still here listening, thank you. Not just for hearing my story, but for feeling it. Because chances are, if you've made it to the end, you know what it feels like to be the forgotten one, the black sheep, the outsider, the kid who was never the favorite, and somehow made to believe that was your fault. Maybe you've buried people without closure. Maybe you've sat at family dinners where everyone laughed, and you pretended to be full just so they wouldn't ask what you were starving for. Maybe you've walked through your own house feeling like a stranger. Or worse, like a ghost. I'm here to tell you this. You are not alone. And you were never invisible. You were just surrounded by people too small to carry the weight of your light. The greatest trick betrayal plays is convincing us we're broken. But the truth? The very fact that you feel deeply, love loyally, and still show up after being overlooked. That is not weakness. That is strength. That is sacred. If you've ever been the one who kept quiet to keep the peace, if you've ever shrunk yourself so others could feel bigger, if you've ever wondered, what's wrong with me? Why don't they see me? Then I want you to hear this. Nothing is wrong with you. Their inability to love you was never your deficiency. It was their limitation. And if you're at the part of your story where you're still aching, still angry, still unpacking what you've inherited emotionally, that's okay too. You don't have to rush forgiveness. You don't have to make it pretty. Sometimes healing looks like writing letters you never send. Sometimes it looks like leaving group chats without saying a word. Sometimes it looks like planting tulips in soil that remembers who you used to be. Before the world told you to dim, Raymond taught me a lot in life. But in death, he gave me one last gift. Proof that showing up matters. Even when no one thanks you. Even when they call you dramatic. Or difficult. Or distant. Even when you're the only one who remembers birthdays. The only one who brings soup. The only one who shows up to funerals. Keep showing up. For yourself. For the people who will one day see you. For the version of you who never got picked first but still ran into the fire anyway. Here's what I'd love for you to do. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt unseen, unloved, or underestimated, drop a comment below and just say, I'm done shrinking. That's it. Let's fill this space with voices that have stayed quiet for too long. Let's make this a place where nobodies find their somebodies. And if you're still in the middle of it all, still holding your grief, your rage, your unspoken words, take this video as a sign. You are allowed to heal at your own pace. You are allowed to walk away without guilt. You are allowed to become someone your younger self would feel safe with. I'll be reading every comment because I know what it feels like to share your story into silence. I promise this space won't be that. And if you haven't already,
Hit like, subscribe,
and share this with someone who needs to be reminded. They were never nobody. They were just surrounded by the wrong eyes. Thanks for sitting with me. And remember, family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when it bleeds.